Good evening and welcome to HRC's special live town hall event. I'm Nick Harris, she, they pronouns, and I'm the Vice President of Strategic Outreach and Engagement at the Human Rights Campaign. I'm also a Floridian born and raised. So tonight's conversation really hits home. It's tough all over the country for our community, but Florida feels extra hard right now. I know many of you listening are feeling a similar pain. I also know you tuned in for a reason, so we thank you for joining us. Our goal tonight is to discuss the current state of emergency impacting our LGBTQ plus community and our country and how you can get involved. To help me kick it off, I have the pleasure of introducing Kelley Robinson, President of the Human Rights Campaign, the first Black queer woman to lead the organization. Kelley has spent the last 15 years creating and leading winning campaigns and programs. She's been at the forefront in the fight for bodily autonomy and racial and gender equity, centering marginalized communities and building political power. Let me share with you just a few of the things Kelley has already done at HRC, like getting the Respect for Marriage Act passed and the Michigan Civil Rights Act amended to calling out Tennessee for its recent legislative slate of hate, and the New York Times for its anti-trans news coverage. From participating in congressional hearings to attending the State of the Union as guest of House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Kelley is definitely on the move with HRC, and we are so proud of her. Y'all help me introduce Kelley, our president.
Hello. I'm Kelley Robinson. I use she, her pronouns. I'm proud to serve as president of the Human Rights Campaign. Thank you all for joining today's town hall, and happy Pride. For the first time in HRC's history, we have declared a state of emergency for LGBTQ plus Americans. This is not an exaggeration. This is not about being dramatic. This is about the real threats that we are facing right now, the real violence that we are facing right now. I'm talking about the drag performers who are being targeted by the Proud Boys. I'm talking about the trans women who are being harassed on their way to work. I'm talking about the trans children who are scared to go to the bathroom at school. This tidal wave of transphobia and homophobia that we're seeing, it didn't come from nowhere. The political attacks that we've seen as state legislatures have enacted bans on gender-affirming care, bans on LGBTQ plus books and education, bans on drag performances, these things have led to unthinkable violence. The extremist rhetoric that we have heard from politicians and pundits who are just trying to rile up their base has actually led to the loss of life and livelihood for our community and for our families. And now we have 75 plus new anti-LGBTQ plus state laws that we have to navigate. For residents in hostile states, HRC is here for you. For folks who are traveling, HRC is here for you. For the kids and the families that are watching, HRC is here for you. And that's why we have declared this national state of emergency. We want you and your families to have the information that you need to stay safe in the months ahead as you navigate these new laws and the conditions they've created. You know, many families I've talked to, they feel like they have to flee their states just to stay safe, just to protect their kids. Some other families are committed to staying where they are and fighting for their rights. Whatever your decision is, whether you're considering whether to send your kids to school or to go on a vacation or to move to a new job, whatever your decision is, you shouldn't have to face this dizzying patchwork of protections from one state to another. We want you to know what the laws are so that you know what your rights are as well. In service of that, we've got a new guidebook that we've created for the community to keep you safe and ensure that you are aware of your rights. We've also released an impact report for advocates, policymakers, and the media to tell the story of what is happening, to tell the story of the imminent health and safety crisis facing us and our families. All of these tools are available at hrc.im/warning. To be clear, this is not about boycotting. This is about safety. This moment that we're in right now is a call to action for all of us and for all of our allies. Because let's remember that the same horrific things they're saying today about trans people, they were saying about lesbian and gay people 20 years ago. And now the Respect for Marriage Act is a law of the land. The same horrific things that they're saying today about trans people, they were saying about people living with HIV and AIDS 30 years ago. And now We are within eyeshot of ending the epidemic in our lifetime, in our generation. The same things that they're saying about trans people, they've said about all of us, about lesbian folks, about gay folks, about women, about people of color, about Jewish folks, about Muslims, about immigrants. And we've always come together to say enough. HRC, here is my promise to you. We are going to show these extremists how wrong they are. We are going to prove that this nation is greater than all of the hate that they spew at us. And we are going to fight with everything that we've got to ensure that every, and I mean every, LGBTQ plus person can be safe, celebrated, and yes, joyful in every aspect of our lives, without exception. So thank you again for joining us today. And thank you even more so for committing to this fight for freedom and liberation without exception. Because of you, I know that we will get closer to free.
Thank you so much, Kelley. And y'all, I just want you to know, we see the chat. Keep adding that. Kelley's getting so much love right now. This is such an important time for our community. And so thank you so much, Kelley, for reminding us why it's so important to stay engaged with HRC's critical work. So now we want to turn to the Human Rights Campaign foundational updates and what's HRC's national state of emergency means for all of us listening. As the Senior Vice President of Programs, Research, and Training, Jay Brown works with a team of professionals who manage HRC Foundation programs, aiming to ensuring quality for LGBTQ plus people at every intersection of their identities and their lives. Jay is an incredible colleague, and it is truly my pleasure to introduce him. Jay, take it away.
Thank you so much, Nick. It's so wonderful to be here with you all. As you heard from Kelley, the targeting of LGBTQ plus people, and especially trans and non-binary youth, is creating a crisis for our people, especially for families. Millions of LGBTQ plus people now live in regions that present threats of danger to them and their children. Now, LGBTQ folks are born into every kind of family and every zip code and every community in this country, and that won't ever change. But right now, I can't tell you how many families with trans kids I'm hearing from who are making enormously tough decisions no parent should ever have to make about how to keep their family safe. Some are making enormous sacrifices to leave their homes. Some are making enormous sacrifices to stay. And that's why, as part of our declaration, we released a guidebook for LGBTQ plus people to help ensure safety in all 50 states. This includes information on how to identify friendly states with a summary of state-by-state laws. And with more than 75 new laws on the books, the reality on the ground, state by state, are very different. For example, I'm a transgender man, and in 9 states, there are now bathroom bans on the books. That means if I've got to visit family in Florida, I could become a criminal simply for using the men's bathroom. In our programs, we're working with teachers who are worried that they'll have to forcibly out queer kids in 6 states that have these laws on the books. We're working with LGBTQ plus parents who are worried in 6 states that they have don't say gay or trans laws that they're having to deal with. We're working with doctors, with pediatricians who are now trying to navigate how to provide care that they know they need to provide their patients in 20 states that have bans on critical life-saving healthcare for trans youth. So this guidebook provides know your rights information to all the folks out there, whether you're staying, visiting, or fleeing hostile states. We want our community to know that under federal law, most employers with at least 15 employees cannot discriminate against employees and job applicants. We want our folks to know that under federal law, that healthcare providers receiving federal funding cannot discriminate against patients. We want folks to understand that federally funded schools cannot discriminate against students. And for all our folks, we want to be sure that you know there are ways to fight back using the tools we fought for and built together as a community. That means everything from filing complaints with federal agencies to reaching out to your state equality groups and your local community centers for direct support on the ground. We also want to be sure that folks know that how they can join the fight, whoever and wherever they are. For media, activists, and policymakers out there, we've released an impact report that tells the story through data and narratives of folks who are having to flee and who are staying and fighting. All of this is at hrc.im/warning. Folks should use these tools to stay safe and to make the case about the harm that this is causing real people. Use these tools to mobilize folks in power to speak up and speak out against hate. Because that's what this is, and it's wrong, and it's not what this country promises. I know we can be better. We've done this before. This is happening because we've made progress. But when we face backlash, we don't give up, we rise up. As a community, we faced backlash before. But when we came out, when we united, when we rallied together, and when we told our friends, our families, our coworkers who we are and that we needed their help, we changed hearts and minds, and we turned the tide against hate into love. I know we can do it again. And to all of you watching today, I want you to know that HRC is here fighting for you and alongside you. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you so much, Jay. The foundation does incredible work for so many of our communities. So you all, next, we're going to hear from Kate Oakley, Senior Director of Legal Policy. I see the camera kind of going out. Senior Director of Legal Policy and Director of our State Legislative Program. And with her is John Gruber, National Campaign Director. Both will discuss HRC's efforts to fight over 500, you all, discriminatory bills at the state level. Staying engaged and involved is so critical right now. So what we're asking you to do right now, I see so many of you in the chat talking about your homes, what you're fighting for. One of the things you can do right now is to text JOIN, JOIN, to 472-472. Again, that's text JOIN to 472-472 to get action alerts from HRC. We're dropping that in the chat too. This is one of the best ways you can help us fight back against extremism and hate. And if you have questions for our panel, y'all feel free to drop them in the chat. I see you doing some of that already. So let's see what's happening in the States. Kate and John, take it away.
Thank you, Nick. So this is not the best news of all time, but I'm going to give you a quick update on how things are going in the States. And as Jay and Kelley and Nick have all previewed for you, things aren't going great. We are currently at 77 anti-LGBTQ bills that have been enacted into law just this year. And that's more than the number of bills that have been enacted into law in the last 5 years combined. So 77 laws. Every single one of those laws is changing people's lives. Every single one has impacted the trajectory of folks' lives. And as Nick just said, we have more than 525 bills introduced this year in 41 states. I'm really proud of HRC's state legislative program. We use HRC's resources to amplify and support the work of our coalition partners who are doing this work on the ground in the states, as well as we do our own on-the-ground work in state legislatures across the country to support good legislation and defeat bad legislation. We mobilize our members and supporters and ensure elected officials know that we don't build political power to have it. We build political power to use it. And we've had to use every single bit of it this year to fight back against opponents of equality. These opponents are the same folks that we have fought back against for decades, but they have a certain group of objectives that they've manifested into policies that they are pushing into the state legislatures. And these state legislatures are beholden to the most extreme part of their party. They are gerrymandered within an inch of their lives so that the hardest election that they have to get through is their primary, not the general election. So even though we know that popular support for LGBTQ people has never been higher, these state legislatures continue attacking us because they don't represent the will of the people. And their hardest election is to get through their partisan political primary. So what our opponents are trying to do, really 3 different, very overlapping things. But the first is that they're trying to demonize and sexualize LGBTQ folks so that even just the fact of acknowledging someone is LGBTQ qualifies as obscene. So, for example, in schools, this manifests as curriculum censorship, like the Don't Say LGBTQ bans, the book bans, pronoun refusals, where teachers are either allowed or required to misgender and dead name students. This is really getting at the idea that just acknowledging LGBTQ folks exist is somehow in and of itself obscene. We also see that play out in drag bans, right? There's nothing inherently offensive or adult about drag performance. There's no reason that the same drag queen can't on Saturday night do a routine at a club that's racy and adult, and then not the next day go do a reading of a children's book that is absolutely age appropriate at the public library. There's no reason that the performance can't be altered to be able to suit both sets of audiences. What is inherently the same about those two things that is offensive to opponents of equality? It's that drag is associated with LGBTQ folks. It's an LGBTQ related art form. And it is that which makes it obscene, not about the content and not truly about the quality, right, or the performance. This is really going back, and Nick alluded to this as well as Kelley did earlier, to say this is about that sort of vintage homophobia, vintage transphobia, the save our children style rhetoric. They're also trying to invoke religious belief to demand extra ability to discriminate. There are a couple different cases that are moving through the courts right now, as well as a handful of laws that have been introduced and in some cases enacted this year that would create religious refusals for folks to refuse to comply with the law if they can assert a religious justification for doing so. And then finally, and perhaps most importantly, our opponents are trying to isolate, alienate, and terrify LGBTQ people, particularly trans kids. They're trying to undermine our sense of community, belonging, connection, and worth. All of those things that during Pride Month rise to the top for us, right? It's about connecting, it's about being proud, it's about being authentic, and it's about finding strength in a community of folks who feel that same way. Unfortunately, the laws that they're putting forward here are really trying to do the opposite. And that includes very much laws that are refusing to allow trans youth to access age-appropriate, best practice healthcare simply because those folks are transgender. The vast majority of these bills are directed at trans youth, but many of them have implications for adults as well. And it is important to say these bills are denying people healthcare, best practice healthcare, simply because they're trans. Sports bans also are isolating for LGBTQ, but particularly trans young folks. Laws that would require teachers and school personnel to out students to their parents, even if that would put the young person at risk of danger at home. And then, of course, there's also this new type of law that we're seeing this year. We call them LGBTQ erasure acts, and these are exclusionary bioessentialist definitions of sex that refuse many protections of state law, specifically and intentionally to transgender people, more indirectly, but also powerfully to LGBT people, and also to women across the spectrum. So these are really damaging bills that unfortunately we're seeing be enacted this year in some cases and pick up a lot of steam. By flooding the states with this legislation, opponents of equality are trying to turn back the clock, but we can't let them. We just can't. We have to mobilize, and we need our allies to mobilize along with us. This fight is not over. We are in a state of crisis, and we need everyone who cares about equality to be engaged in fighting back. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, John, to tell you more about the work that we are doing in the States.
Thanks so much, Kate. I really appreciate it. So as Kate and others have said, right now we are in a state of emergency because in state legislatures across the country, our opponents are trying to legislate us out of existence. They are trying to make it hard to be LGBTQ. They think they found a wedge issue. They think they found something that they're able to use to attack the LGBTQ community, particularly trans and non-binary folks, and particularly trans and non-binary children. And right now they think that they're winning. And unfortunately, what we have to do is we have to fight back like we always have. So whether you're in Utah, I saw some folks in from Utah or Ohio or Florida or Montana or Texas, you have to fight back with us. And so what HRC is doing in these states is we are doing things like rallies. We are supporting people who are trying to fight for democracy, whether that is the Justins in Tennessee, or that is Representative Zoe Zephyr in Montana, who is a trans representative who is censured and removed from the legislature for fighting a gender-affirming care ban. What HRC is doing is we are mobilizing our supporters and our membership through things like text blasts, through action alerts. We do really, really big rallies and big lobby days. And again, the point of that isn't necessarily that we're going to be able to stop every bad piece of legislation, but it's the fact that we are pushing back and we are really trying to make sure that people see us and they hear us and they hear that we are not going in silence. The other thing that is really important when we think about this legislation and the ways that we can fight back is that we are really going up against really well-funded dark money interests, but they don't really have the support of the American public, right? So there's a group called Alliance Defending Freedom, and what they do is they go and they send people around to every single state. They're not even from the state, and they go and they testify in support of these bills, and they try to use kind of junk science to make people believe that, you know, we're somehow after children or there's like this horrible thing going on that can be stopped, when really we know that the majority of the American public supports, you know, leaving medical decisions and life-saving medical care between people and their doctors and their families. And so what we have to do is we have to expose that. And one way we do that is we actually talk about the facts. So as people out there, as citizens, as voters, it's incumbent upon you, whether that's showing up at your job to an ERG and saying, hey, I want to, you know, join the ERG at my job, or that's, you know, going and meeting with your elected officials wherever you live, and saying, how do I get involved? How do I push back against this legislation? Even if your legislators are, you know, very pro-LGBTQ, or even if they aren't, it's important that you make your voice heard that way. And then again, staying involved with HRC and getting involved in signing up for our text alerts. We really, really, really want you to be able to be mobilized when we are pushing back. One thing that HRC also does, and I think it's really important to name, is we work with community-based organizations. So the organizations on the front lines of this crisis, whether they are, you know, a state equality organization, or they are, you know, maybe a small LGBTQ clinic, right, that are supporting the youth most impacted by this. And so you supporting those organizations as well is critical to this fight. And with that, I will turn it back over to the host.
Thank you so much to our speakers for joining us and talking about that. I really appreciate you, Kate and John. I'm also looking at our comments. You all, we're seeing the stuff that you're putting in the comments. I'm hearing people already say, like, again, what can they do? You can text JOIN to 472-472. We're also trying to drop some of the resources you all are asking for in the chat. We are doing that hard work that you're asking about. I think the key that we're getting here is that each of these bills affects like real people. We know many of them target LGBTQ plus children and young adults. It's really staggering, and I'm angry because you all, we know the real world impact of this. And that's why it's so important we keep our members and our supporters informed and engaged. And we appreciate all you're doing to fight with us. So you all, we have time for questions, and keep the stuff coming in the chat. We see it. We're trying to get you resources really fast. You all, some of the questions that we've had previously submitted by some of our members, one comes from Kevin in Maryland. And the question is there anything we should fear from the Supreme Court and the impact on our community? So I'm thinking maybe Kate, you could take that. I'll repeat it one more time. Is there anything we should fear from the Supreme Court and the impact on our community?
Yes. You know, this community has, I think, become used to in recent years the idea that the Supreme Court is on our side, is on the side of equality, is going to be helping ensure that LGBTQ people, that our rights are protected. And I think, unfortunately, that is a really important attitude for us to be shifting on. The makeup of the Supreme Court is obviously very different. The makeup, frankly, of the federal judiciary across the country is really different. And so it's simply not going to be a good idea for us to assume that the Supreme Court is going to be with us on issues related to equality. That said, it also, as a lawyer, I feel confident that we are on the right side of this issue, right? I feel confident that the cases that we have already seen filed, in some cases by HRC, in many cases by our coalition partners, I feel confident that some of these are going to get really great resolutions in the court. And frankly, so far, these cases, especially challenging the sports bans, the bans on gender affirming care, those really have been successful thus far in the courts. Now, it's still really early days and there's a long way to come. And so there is a lot that we need to be concerned about. We need to be activating on. We can't just assume that the courts are going to fix what's happening in the states. We absolutely positively have to be fighting back against these bills from being passed in the first place. We cannot be complacent and assume that the courts will fix it. That said, as I said, we have been having success. There are some cases in front of the Supreme Court right now that will absolutely impact LGBTQ folks. There's a case called 303 Creative that is about a wedding website designer who does not want to serve LGBTQ folks, same-sex couples specifically. And there are other cases in front of the Supreme Court that really impact issues that HRC cares a lot about, including affirmative action. So there are a lot of things that we need to be watching the Supreme Court for this term, and there are lots of ways that we need to be preparing for our issues to be in front of the Supreme Court again and again. After last year's disastrous decision in the Dobbs case that overturned Roe versus Wade, it is incredibly important that we understand that the federal judiciary is in a different place than it had been before. And we have to be on high alert to ensure that our rights are being protected at the states, in the courts, and in Congress as well.
Thank you so much for that, Kate. We just want to flag you all. We're dropping the resources you're asking for in the chat. The resource guide is there, so please scroll down. Y'all on fire on this chat. So we're trying to keep up. We'll also drop that again. Again, you can also text 472-472, text them join. So y'all, everything you're asking for in the chat and more is there. Also, this is why we want y'all to get involved. So we're going to go to our next question. It comes from Sarah in my home state, Florida. And this I'm going to give to John. How will the Equality Act or state level equivalents help us during the state of emergency?
Yeah, thanks so much. And I really do think that that question is something that we can answer and give a little bit of hope to the conversation, which I think we all need during this Pride Month. So in states across the country, whether they're blue or red, people are fighting for equality, and we know that we want to pass legislation at the state level that would protect the entire LGBTQ community. So we've had two recent victories. The first is in Michigan, where we were able to amend the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act. And what that does is it really expands protections, critical protections, to all aspects of the LGBTQ community, right? So you can't be fired for being gay. It protects housing. It protects all different things that we depend on in everyday life, which is a huge victory. And the way we were able to do that is we were able to win pro-equality majorities in the Michigan House, the Michigan Senate, and we have a pro-equality governor. And so that shows that the work that HRC does, along with our partners on the ground, works, and it makes Michigan another state with those protections. The next state I actually want to talk about is Pennsylvania, where we are really working to pass another law that is similar to the one in Michigan. Pennsylvania is the only state in the Northeast without a law that would protect LGBTQ people in place, or would provide ample protections under law to LGBTQ people. And so they are currently working to pass that. And again, it's because we work hard on the ground, we invest in elections, and we hold our elected officials accountable. So to really kind of answer your question, Nick, in states where we run on the issue, where we talk about the issues, we win, and we're actually able to pass these laws. I would also want to highlight Minnesota, which again, because we were able to elect pro-equality majorities, we were able to pass a conversion therapy law. And so conversion therapy is a very discredited practice that's very harmful to LGBTQ folks. we were able to get it banned, and it was signed into law earlier this year. And so again, we are fighting back in these states. We are fighting back even in red states where they are still introducing laws that will protect the LGBTQ community, and we're not giving up. So here's to passing good laws at the state level.
Thank you, John. I got to tell you, great answer. I'm coming in to Jay. Jay, I got a question for you, but everybody's asking about this resource guide. So, I mean, that's something we want to hit as well. But while we do that and talk about that, how is HRC working with corporate America to push back against anti-LGBTQ plus propaganda and laws as well?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And first I want to give a shout out to a couple folks who I've seen in the chat who I know. So Rachel and Mimi, who are awesome parents of trans kids doing the fight in their states. Shout out to you both. Also to all the librarians who are on the feed. You all are amazing. And I saw somebody who was plugging the power of ERGs, employee resource groups, or BRGs, and that's a group of folks who are inside companies who have for a long time pushed their companies to do better in their workplaces for LGBTQ plus people. We work and have worked with corporate America for more than 20 years to make inclusive policies and practices to do well by our community. And right now we have more than 300 companies that are standing with us, speaking out against these anti-LGBTQ laws. We are in the field right now with a pledge that's asking companies to go a bit further and to be counted into this fight in a couple of more robust ways. One, reiterating their rejection of anti-LGBTQ hate and calling on lawmakers to abandon these efforts. Two, really raising up the authentic and honest stories of our community, especially employees and customers who are impacted by this kind of anti-LGBTQ legislation and hate. And three, ensuring access to healthcare for trans and non-binary people who are families and employees on their policies where they legally can, and making sure that their employees have access to these important rights. So if you are inside one of those companies, please do ask your employer to join us. You can find that and all of these other resources at hrc.im/warning. That's where the state of emergency information is. You can find the guidebook, the impact report, a listing of laws, links to maps in your states, and then count us in area where we really are asking folks to go in further to especially stand with trans and non-binary folks in this fight. There are a couple things that I think are really important around this question that folks need to understand, and in the larger context of things. First, doubling down on your values isn't just the right thing for companies to do, it's good for business. Research shows that a brand that publicly supports LGBTQ people and demonstrates their commitment to our rights are going to have Americans 2 times as likely to buy or use that brand. So it's good for businesses. And actually, Americans who are 18 to 34 are 5.5 times more likely to work at a company if it's publicly supporting our rights. And it's not just LGBTQ plus consumers or customers. 70% of non-LGBTQ plus people believe companies should publicly support our community. I think that's an important thing to sort of expand on too in the context of this larger threat we're facing. The vast majority of the public doesn't want this stuff happening. They stand with us as a community. They're just not there yet in being vocal and being mobilized in support of our rights. We need to get louder. We need to get more active in our local communities. We need to get folks involved in the fight in whatever ways we can. So to all of the folks who are watching, who are teachers, who are at companies, who are librarians, thank you. Thank you for doing what you're doing to try to get more folks involved, more folks active, more folks vocal in this fight, because there are more folks who believe in love than hate and want to be on the right side of history in this.
Thank you, Jay, so much. You all, the questions are still coming, so we're going to keep trying to answer them. So one of the questions we see here is, in a year in hate and extremism report, 23 of the 99 extremist-tied candidates they are tracking won their elections during the 2022 midterms. Y'all, this hurts my heart, but it's facts. Any thoughts on 2024?
Well,
Kate, I'm gonna give that to you.
yeah, I'm happy to take that one. And look, I think the question of extremism is really big, a really scary one right now. And, John talked about the dark money groups who are behind the legislation. Please know these, as I said, these are the same folks we have been fighting forever. These are the same folks who wanted to have same-sex sexual relations be criminalized, the same folks we fought against for marriage equality, the same folks who put forward the bathroom bill, same folks who were fighting for religious refusals. These are all the same people. We know what they care about. They don't care about women's sports. They don't care about the health of trans kids. They don't care about protecting women from being assaulted in bathrooms. They do not have no track record of working on those issues. So I guess I shouldn't say they don't care. Maybe they care in their heart. But this is not what these organizations do. What they do is discriminate against LGBTQ people in any way that they can. And one of them recently told the New York Times that they're throwing spaghetti against the wall to see what sticks, right? So this isn't about the actual facts of whether or not trans kids are receiving best practice care, because they are. And it's not about whether trans kids should be allowed to play sports and if that's going to hurt women's sports. Women's sports has lots of real challenges folks could be facing. They're not facing any of those. Instead, they're creating new ones because they only care about these issues insofar as it allows them to scapegoat trans folks, because what they care about, what they do, what their missions are, is to take back equality from LGBTQ folks, the cultural and lived equality that we have been able to gain. They are trying to pull that back. So it is important to say these are extremist groups. The Alliance Defending Freedom has been designated as a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center. The American College of Pediatricians, which is only a couple hundred pediatricians, not the famous and established American Academy of Pediatricians. The college, which is often cited as one of the experts on gender affirming care, has also been designated as a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center. These are not serious people coming forward with serious policy proposals. These are folks whose agenda is to eliminate equality for LGBTQ folks. So that is where they are coming from. And so when we're talking about extremism winning elections, I talked a little bit about the gerrymandering and how gerrymandering in state legislatures makes it so that the folks who are the most partisan, the most extreme, are the folks who are getting through, because the hardest election that they have to win is their primary, and they're not accountable to the general population during the general vote, right? So that's how we get this really significant disparity between the popular support for LGBTQ people and these politicians who are elected and then pursue these really discriminatory aims. What does all of that mean? What it means is we have to activate. I saw someone put in the chat that we don't wait for something to come up. Don't wait for a legislator to say that they're thinking about this bill. Don't wait for the bill to be introduced. Reach out to your legislator, to the people who represent you, and say, I support LGBTQ equality and I expect you will too. Don't think that just because someone doesn't share your party affiliation, that means they can't hear your side of the story. We know the most powerful way to make change is by telling personal stories. We know that trans issues are hypothetical to too many people. Trans people are not hypothetical. And so we need to have folks understand that there are real folks on the other end of these hurtful policies. And so the more that you can tell your story, the more you can lift up the stories of the folks around you, even to folks who maybe don't understand, that's a huge part of the movement that we need to be building that will support equality. Because once folks have to look someone in the eye and understand that their rhetoric is harming folks, it can really start to change the conversation. No guarantees. Some people are going to be where they are. I don't mean to be Pollyanna about this, but you would be stunned how much having a conversation with someone can change their mind. So I do recommend be safe, be thoughtful, and if you are able to do so safely, tell your story and make sure that you're being thoughtful about the fact that folks around you maybe can't safely tell their stories, and see if you can find a way to help them do that too. So we have to combat this extremism. It's not going to go away. We have to fight it head on. And that's the only way that we're going to get rid of it.
Thank you, Kate. I appreciate that. John, I got a question for you. Will HRC keep organizing staff in battleground states once the state legislative season ends to prepare for the presidential election?
Absolutely. And so I guess my simple answer for that is that there are no off years, right? And what that really means is that HRC is invested not just in presidential elections, we're invested in off-year elections, we're invested in municipal elections sometimes, because we know that equality is so important that we have to fight for it every single time it's at the ballot box by holding people accountable and by making sure that we are putting the resources into defending our community. And one of the things that Kate said, I really want to elaborate on, which are these kind of extremist policies, right? So we know that in state legislatures across the country, there's a certain amount of districts that are just cooked. Like there's no way for us to compete there. But we also know that this issue that, you know, when people go to the ballot box, it's not a motivating issue for a lot of American voters to discriminate. They don't vote based on discrimination. They're not looking to make life harder for people. I mean, we know that for most mainstream people, this issue is not a winning issue. And politicians learn that too, right? You only have to look back at the 2022 election results where a lot of people staked a lot of money on, you know, saying, oh, I'm going to go crusade against trans rights, and I'm gonna make this my defining issue, and they didn't end up winning. A lot of these extremists didn't end up winning, and it's also in part because HRC was on the ground. We were on the ground in 8 key battleground states, which are, you know, Georgia, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Arizona, and Nevada. I'm missing 3 off the top of my head, but then we also were in other states, right? We were in places looking to see where we could support LGBT candidates, places like Colorado. We were fighting in California. We were in some of these other Senate battlegrounds. So again, we know that our issue is actually a good issue for people to run on, and that the other side doesn't understand that. So we're going to keep using that to our advantage, not win every time, but we're going to continue to put up a fight. The last thing I would say about elections and the electoral and what we can expect next year, is that the other side is, again, and like Kate said, taking everything in the kitchen sink and throwing it against the wall. So what is incumbent upon us to do is to fight until they do not want to do that with our issue anymore, until they cannot see our issue as a winning issue, even if it's in the reddest of red districts, because people just see the truth. And the best way we can do that is to educate our neighbors, to join those employee resource groups, to pressure our companies to get involved, and to make sure that we are making our voices loud and clear.
Thank you so much for that, John. I'm going to come back to you, Jay. Bella, number one, we see you, right? We see you, we love you, and we're going to try to answer some of your questions. Bella wrote, I'm a trans woman. I live in Wilsonville, Alabama. I need to ask how I can protect myself as a trans woman when people judge me. Jay, what advice would you give?
Yeah, I mean, it is so tough, Bella, and I see all the folks sort of offering thoughts, and I echo some of those thoughts. I mean, I think one of the things that's so important is community, right? So when you can find somebody who has been through what you're going through in a space that you've been going through, like, they can give you courage in ways that you might not be able to find alone. They can give you resources. They can give you just a release too. So find community is the number one thing that I would say. And I understand being sometimes in very rural places, it's very hard. The beauty of being in our 2023 world is there are people online. There are online communities that you can also find help and support in. So that's a great place to start. But safety is a real issue, and it's a real concern, especially for trans folks, especially for trans women, especially for BIPOC trans folks. And it's not something that we should shy away from. Right now, folks are feeling and are living in a more unsafe world than we have been ever as a community in recent history. So that is something, you know, as we have said again and again, it is so important. If you can be visible, if you can tell your story, you can change hearts and minds. That will ultimately unlock the keys to safety. But that's why we need allies so much, right? So when our allies capitulate to bullies, when they stop being more vocal, when they stop putting pride flags up, that matters to our community. It matters to our sense of safety and to our ability to sort of advocate for ourselves and to know that there are safe spaces for us. So if you are an ally and you are not yet being visible in your allyship, please do that. It can start with a simple thing as putting that HRC bumper sticker on your car. It can be putting a rainbow flag on your front door. It can be working to make sure your business is being vocal in support of LGBTQ plus folks inside the workplace, but also when it comes to the state of the law. So many different ways, so many different things you can do from a local level or from a national level, digitally or in person. But Bella, we are there with you. We see you, and what you're experiencing is what so many folks are experiencing, and it just goes to show why we need folks like you all online pledging to do more. So thank you, Bella, and we're with you.
Thank you so much, and well said, Jay. I want to thank Kate. I want to thank John. I want to thank Kelley, our president. Y'all, I'm worried about what's happening in the world, right? But when I get on here and I see this chat on fire, this is what community looks like, right? We heard y'all. We're getting rid of the trolls. Guess what, trolls? We aren't going a damn place. So the reality is community just came together for our message to still be heard. That's what we got to do away from this chat and out here in our streets and our communities. So you all, I just want to say this to you. We thank all of our speakers for joining us this evening. And more so, we thank all of you for being with us after going through so much this year. We thank you for sticking with us. Your membership, your support, it's vital to making this work happen. There's no us without you. Human Rights Campaign is only as great as the humans in it. That's us, that's you, that's our community, you all. So thank you for everything you continue to do to fight for equality and liberation. Y'all stay safe. Good night. And if you need to remember the love, come and check this chat back out. Y'all, we love you. Stay safe. Good night. Happy Pride. Happy Pride, you all.